They say temptation doesn't always arrive in loud, obvious moments, but in quiet, almost innocent ones. My name is Asim, and until a few months ago, I was a man convinced that love, even without passion, could be enough. I was engaged to Zara, a childhood friend turned partner. Our relationship made sense, stable, familiar, safe. But safe doesn't mean whole. It was during a short work trip that everything shifted. I traveled to Lahore to attend a week-long company conference and stayed at my cousin Bilal's house. He and I were close growing up, and the arrangement seemed ideal, comfortable and informal. What I didn't expect was her. Hina. She was Bilal's sister-in-law, visiting for a few days from Islamabad. I remembered meeting her once at a wedding. Years ago, she was the quiet one, soft-spoken, reserved. But now, she carried herself with quiet confidence and a gentle curiosity about the world that caught me off guard. We started with small talk, harmless, almost forgettable. Conversations about food, weather, the usual pleasantries. But there was something disarming in the way she listened. It wasn't just hearing, it was presence. I hadn't realized how much I craved that. The first night passed like a blur. The second, we stayed up late, sitting in a lounge after everyone had gone to sleep. I talked more than I intended, about work stress, Zara's growing distance, and how lately I felt more like a fixture in someone else's plan than a person living his own life. Hina didn't interrupt. She didn't offer advice. She just understood. The house was small, and due to the number of guests, extra mattresses were laid out on the floor of the drawing room. Bilal and his wife slept in their room, and I was told to share the drawing room with Hina. The arrangement felt awkward at first, but exhaustion overruled discomfort. We slept with our backs to each other, saying nothing, the silence thick with something we both refused to name. But I remember waking up in the middle of the night. The storm outside had grown louder, thunder rolling like distant drums. In my half-asleep days, I shifted closer, and instinctively, I placed one leg over her. Not out of desire, but for warmth, maybe connection. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak. But I felt her breathing change. That single movement, a leg, lightly resting over hers, should have meant nothing. But in the quiet of that room, it felt like everything. I told myself it was innocent. I wanted to believe it was. But as I lay there, unable to sleep, I realized something I hadn't admitted in years. I was missing more than love in my life. I was missing being seen. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't invisible anymore. The morning after that silent storm, nothing was said. Hina didn't look at me differently, nor did she pull away. But something had shifted. An unspoken acknowledgement had crept in between us. It was subtle, but undeniable. We moved through the day like careful actors, our words polite, our gestures measured. But when our eyes met, there was a pause, like the world hesitated for a beat too long. That evening, the house was quiet again. Bilal and his wife had gone out to a dinner gathering, and we stayed back, Hina claiming a headache, and I, conveniently, exhausted for meetings. The moment they left, silence fell around us. Not uncomfortable, just loaded. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the television on but ignored. I asked her if she slept well. She nodded. Then, without looking at me, she whispered, "It wasn't wrong, was it?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how. So, I asked back, "Do you think it was?" She paused. "I think it felt honest." That word, honest, hit me like a confession. Not of sin, but of truth. What we were sharing wasn't rooted in lust. It was born from loneliness, from the craving to be known without judgment. And yet, knowing that didn't make it any less dangerous. We talked for hours that night. About childhood regrets, broken families, failed expectations. I learned about the boy who left her without a word 2 years ago, about how she never felt enough. I told her about Zara, how things looked perfect on the outside but felt hollow inside. Every word peeled away another layer. It got late. The power flickered during a brief outage. We lit a small candle, its flickering light casting shadows across the walls. We lay down again, side by side, just like the night before. Except this time, the silence was heavier. I turned toward her, unsure of what I was doing, only that I didn't want the moment to pass unspoken. "I didn't mean anything last night," I said. She looked at me, eyes soft. But it did mean something. I didn't argue, because she was right. Then, quietly, I did it again. I placed one leg over her. No movement. No touch beyond that. Just the warmth of skin. The shared space of something we were too afraid to name. She didn't move away. She closed her eyes. And in that moment, I felt everything I had buried for years come rushing to the surface. Not lust. Not thrill. Just the aching, desperate need to be close to someone who truly saw me. It wasn't what we did that betrayed Zara. It was what we felt. As the candle burned lower and our breaths fell into rhythm, I knew something had broken, and no one had to witness it for it to be real. Returning home to Karachi, I expected the weight of those nights to fade. I told myself it had just been a moment, brief, fragile, and now over. But the truth clung to me like humidity in August, seeping into everything I did. Zara noticed the change before I even spoke a word. "You've been quiet," she said one evening as we ate dinner in silence. "Is everything okay?" I nodded.
Lied.
Smiled. But inside, I wasn't sure what okay meant anymore. I avoided her gaze when she spoke, flinched when she tried to hold my hand. Every time I looked at her, I felt like a thief in my own home. Not because I'd committed a crime, but because I was carrying feelings that didn't belong. Hina had gone back to Islamabad. We hadn't spoken since that last night, no calls, no messages. But she was everywhere in my mind. I found myself scrolling through old pictures from Bilal's wedding just to see her in the background. I couldn't explain it. I didn't want to. Days later, a message came. From Hina. It was short. "Are you okay?" I stared at it for 10 minutes before replying. "I don't know." That opened a floodgate. We began texting again, carefully, quietly, cautiously. No flirting, no promises, just the same honest connection we had shared in person. But even that was a betrayal, wasn't it? Not of the body, but of the heart. "I think about that night," she wrote once. "Not because of what we did, but because of how I felt. Safe. Seen." I didn't respond to that one. Zara began growing suspicious. I'd become distant, distracted. She caught me staring at my phone too long. One evening, she looked directly at me and asked, "Is there someone else?" The room fell still. "No," I said, a bit too quickly. She looked at me for a long time. "Then why do I feel like you're not here anymore?" I had no answer. The guilt gnawed at me. I hadn't kissed Hina, hadn't touched her beyond that single leg, that unspoken nearness. And yet, I had betrayed something more sacred. Zara's trust. Her belief that I was hers, wholly and completely. I told Hina we needed to stop.
She didn't argue.
"I know," she replied. "We were searching for warmth in the wrong winter." The silence that followed felt like a door closing quietly in the distance. Zara stood by me, still unaware of the full truth. But the foundation had cracked. I could feel it every time she reached for me, and I didn't reach back with the same certainty. Love, I realized, isn't just about what you do when you're watched. It's about who you are when no one sees. The silence between Zara and me had turned into a language of its own, one where every unspoken word felt heavier than any confession. We no longer fought. We no longer touched. We just existed, like two actors in a play whose script had run dry. I tried to be present, taking her out to dinner, complimenting her on things I barely noticed, but the effort felt mechanical. She could tell. One night, as we sat on the balcony in silence, she finally said what I had been fearing all along. "You're still thinking about her, aren't you?" I didn't ask who she meant. She stood, her voice calm but final. "I can't keep loving someone who's somewhere else in his mind." She packed a bag that night. Not out of rage, but resignation. The kind that comes when someone realizes they've lost to a ghost. I didn't try to stop her. I didn't know how to explain that I hadn't fallen in love with Hina. I had fallen into need. A desperate, emotional hunger that I had never known how to name until it was too late. Days turned into weeks. No messages from Hina. No calls from Zara. I found myself sitting alone in my apartment more often, staring at the ceiling at night, haunted not by what I had done, but by what I hadn't done. I hadn't chosen honesty. I hadn't stopped when I could have. I hadn't protected the one person who had loved me despite my silence. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. From Hina. It wasn't long. She wrote that she was moving abroad to start fresh. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet decision to let go of everything that felt too heavy to carry. Her final words read, "We both found something real in a moment we weren't supposed to. But real doesn't always mean right." I sat with that sentence for a long time. There was no grand closure. No final conversation. Just the slow acceptance that sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come with scandal or sin. They come wrapped in silence, in what could have been, in feelings left unspoken for too long. I started therapy soon after. Not to fix what was broken with Zara, it was already too late for that, but to understand myself. To figure out why I'd let something so small, a single night, a single touch, spiral into a storm that destroyed the trust one once thought unbreakable. Looking back now, I still remember that moment, when I placed one leg over her. It seemed so simple, so harmless. But that single gesture wasn't about the body. It was about the soul reaching for something it lacked. And once that boundary was crossed, there was no return. Some stories don't end with love rekindled. Some end with a man learning that even soft betrayals can echo loud enough to collapse a future.